A closed head injury simply means a brain injury caused by some sort of trauma which does not result in a skull fracture. Closed head injuries are the most common type of brain injury and represent the majority of the approximately 3 million TBI-related ER visits each year. In our practice, we often represent clients with closed head injuries suffered as a result of trauma in a motor vehicle crash, from a fall, or after being struck in the head by an object. We are well aware of the damage the brain can suffer from head trauma, even without a skull fracture. In this video, we will discuss the basic biomechanics of closed head injuries. What is meant by biomechanics? The study of biomechanics of head injury primarily looks at the relationship between the forces applied to the head and the resulting injury to the brain. But before we get there, some studies suggest that the type of brain injury depends on whether the head is stationary and is struck by a moving object, as opposed to the head moving and striking a stationary object. The research suggests that there is really no difference from a biomechanics perspective, assuming the other factors that we will discuss in a minute are the same. Both situations are equally likely to result in a TBI. So what are the factors from a biomechanics standpoint that contribute to the severity of closed head injuries? There are really three of them. Number one, the force or acceleration of impact. Number two, the nature of the object striking the head. And number three, the head's response to the impact. Let's take a closer look at each of the factors in turn. Force and acceleration are related terms that refer to the severity of the head trauma. Most people understand that in general, the force generated in high-speed car crash is greater than in crashes at low speed. However, that does not necessarily mean that there is greater head trauma in high-speed crashes. Instead, injuries to the brain are better understood in terms of the brain's acceleration relative to the acceleration of the head or skull. For example, getting struck in the head by a moving object causes the brain to accelerate within the skull and potentially cause damage either in the area of the trauma, known as a coup injury, opposite from the location of the trauma, known as a counter-coup injury, or across the entire brain, known as a diffuse brain injury. Acceleration also applies to situations where the head is moving, like someone driving a motorcycle, and as a result of crashing into a stationary or slower moving object, the head is suddenly decelerated. Even though the head is decelerated, the brain inside the head keeps moving at high speed and strikes the inside of the skull and sometimes rattles within the skull, causing damage. The next factor, the nature of the object striking the head, is related to the force and acceleration generated. When the head strikes a hard or stiff object, it will result in greater force than if the head strikes a softer object, which allows the moving head to be brought to rest over a longer duration and therefore with a lower acceleration. Interestingly, because head impact with a softer object allows for head trauma over a longer period of time as the head decelerates, the recent science suggests that it may actually result in greater injury to the brain. The final factor, the head's response to impact, can also be important from a biomechanics standpoint. If the head is not able to move at all in response to impact, for example, in the case of a brick falling on the head of a construction worker lying on a concrete floor, the resulting brain injury is likely to be great, and in fact, you would probably see a skull fracture in that case. Furthermore, when the head is able to move in response to impact, the research has shown that a rotational movement of the head, as opposed to a linear or straight line movement upon impact, is more likely to result in shear injuries, or in other words, the tearing of nerve fibers within the brain. Now you know the major biomechanical factors that influence the severity of closed head injuries. In our representation of clients with TBIs, we regularly consult with biomechanical engineers, accident reconstructionists, neurologists, and other specialists to help us understand the biomechanics of their injuries and make sure those responsible for their injuries are held accountable. To discuss a potential case with one of our attorneys, call us at 312-527-4500 for a free consultation or visit us online at passenpowell.com.